So Ben noticed something that those of you who've been with me longer probably already have noticed, whether or not we've said explicitly. I try to keep, cover certain things, but then sometimes one thing takes more, one thing gets put off. So we today are going to start, we're going to do Lech Lecha. I thought we'd be a little past that bit of the Torah, but we'll talk about Lech Lecha today. We're going to talk about Greenberg chapter 2, Kashrut, and it's really okay if you didn't read the chapter, but we'll read it for next time, please. Um, and yeah, and then Kalushkin, we're on chapter 3, and we're going to go a little deeper into the concept of reward and punishment, and kind of some of the classical sources on that. And then I think I have to confirm this. I think that we're scheduled to have so it's 3 sessions a month. And I think we're scheduled to have a week off next week, so that'll be for 2 weeks from now. Okay, so anything anybody want to share from the week before we jump in? Anything happened that you got to share? Okay. Um, so let me shut the window. Okay, so we're doing Parshat Lech Lecha, which is Genesis 12, but I want to start just before Genesis 12. And right, Lech Lecha is God appearing to Abraham, sending Abraham off on a spiritual quest. But I want to start just before when Abraham just appears on the scene. And remember that before he's called Abraham, his name is Abram. There's no hay in his name. God gives him the hay as a symbol of God's name. So we start out just calling him Abram. This is a line of Terach. Terach begot Abram, Nachor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot. Haran died in the lifetime of his father Terach in his native land, Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nachor married wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. Notice she also doesn't have the H yet, the hay. And that of Nachor's wife Milcah, daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terach took his son Abram, his grandson, Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram. They set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans for the land of Canaan. When they came as far as Haran, they settled there. The days of Terach came to 205 years. Terach died in Haran. God said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land, from your father's house to land I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You shall be a blessing." Question. Well, what questions does this raise for you guys? Before I should say what questions it raises for me. Does this raise any? This to me, there's like a glaring question. Is there a glaring question here? When God appears to Abram, why Abram?
Because he didn't believe in idols like his father and everyone around him.
How do we know?
It said so in the Torah before that he always questioned them, even as a child. And then there was a story where he destroyed the idols in his father's shop while they were gone
Mhm.
and
So
blamed it
good.
on the idol.
So you're jumping to the midrash. So the midrash is an answer. So
Oh,
midrash, that's okay. It's okay. Midrash was written between um, the earliest midrashim were written 2,000 years ago. And remember, the Torah is 2,500 or 3,000 years old, depending who you ask. But no matter who you ask, it's much older than that. So Midrash is coming to fill in those gaps. But there's a very big gap here, right? What do we know about Abram? Right? God's about to appear to the guy, say, "I'm going to turn you into this huge nation that has my mission of sanctifying the world." Who is the guy? What do we know about him? We just look through and I made it smaller so we could see the whole passage. Hope that, I don't know, I could make it bigger, but then we couldn't see the whole passage. So what do we know? Verse 27, he was born. Yeah, I'll make it bigger. So verse 27, he was born. So verse 26, Haran died. That was his brother. Haran died. And Ur of the Chaldeans. He got married. His wife was barren. And they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans, but actually didn't make it there. They settled in Haran. All we know. Is there any other hints from the text? Not really. I don't see any, right? We know nothing about this guy. So why would God suddenly appear to somebody? Now, Jessica, you gave one answer, and that's the answer that the Midrash says, which is that what did you say? His father served idols, everyone else served idols, he didn't, right? So if you are Abram growing up in this society, how might you come to no longer believe in idols? Now, I'm asking you to think imaginatively, right? I'm asking you to use your imagination. This is what Midrash is. This is what Midrash does, is it uses its imagination to try to fill in these blanks. And it will fill it in different ways. So you can have 10 different answers from a Midrash. Well, this rabbi says this, or this rabbi says this. It's an exercise in imagination. So if how might it happen? And in some ways, you guys are in a very similar situation because many of you were raised Christian, and the same thing I hear the same experience from people who grew up in the Muslim world. Right? I grow up Muslim, and then I read the Quran. I try to be a good Muslim, and I realize so. This is. Um, some of you know I raised money to help somebody escape Bangladesh. His story is like I saw I saw sexual abuse by imams, and I realized in the Quran that Muhammad is a sexual abuser and genocidal, and like I realized like that's no. So somehow from inside this religion, he realized he had to go out, right? He saw the contradictions in it. So how might Abraham have realized he needed to leave idolatry?
But it just wasn't doing anything for him. He didn't feel any. It didn't make him feel anything. It wasn't doing anything for him. He didn't benefit from it. I mean,
Maybe to benefit. Who
When
did
I
benefit from idolatry?
when I read in the Midrash, it said that the idol makers, they were making money, and that when he was a child, he would look at blades of glass and think the world was so beautiful that no man, like men who were making the idols, none of the idols, no one could ever make anything so beautiful. So it separated him from others.
Great.
And
So let me separate out your answers and Ben's answers, right? So number one was Ben's answer, which was, he's who was benefiting from idolatry? The people selling the idols. And by the way, who else was benefiting from idolatry? In Egypt, who benefited from the way the religion was set up?
The
well, the
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh.
The Pharaoh, right? Religion was set up to benefit this guy. This guy set up this system, putting himself on top. So there was a person named Nimrod who we see earlier in the text. If I can find him, let me find Nimrod. I apologize. Where's Nimrod? You know what? I should just look it up on Google. So there's a guy named Nimrod. Sorry. Genesis Nimrod. Thank God for Google. Okay. Um, 10:8. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Um, that's why it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. So the Midrash takes this guy Nimrod and said, "Oh well, he was a strong man. So if he was a strong man, then the Midrash imagines he set himself up in charge of the society. He was in charge. He made people worship him. He claimed to be the god, and he set up this whole system of idolatry to serve himself. So guess why Abraham needed to run away?
Nimrod was angry at him for doubting him.
Absolutely, absolutely. And right when strong men get angry at you, what do they try to do?
They tried to hurt you.
They try to hurt you or kill you, right? So what do you guess what happened to his brother?
Oh,
Yeah. So now the Midrash goes on a scavenger hunt, and it says, "Oh, he died in the lifetime of his father Terach in his native land, Ur of the Chaldeans. Ur in Aramaic means fire. So guess how he was killed?
by fire.
Yes, he was thrown into a fiery furnace. And why wasn't Avram killed? Right? Avram was the one who's discovering God. So why wasn't Avram killed?
God intervened.
God intervened. Yes. So Nimrod throws Avram into the fiery furnace. Avram survives miraculously. So Haran, what does Haran do?
I don't know.
You're Avram's brother. You're living in a society where everyone's scared of Nimrod, but you see your brother gets thrown into a fiery furnace and survives. So what do you say?
I'm going to send my son away.
Wait, I'm sorry. No, you're Haran. You're Avram's brother.
Oh,
You're his brother. So Nimrod says to you, okay, Haran, who are you with? Me or Avram?
Stays
Who are
with
you
it.
with?
Stays with Nimrod.
Actually, what they say is that Haran saw his brother survive. So his Haran is like, I don't know. He sees his brother survive, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm with that guy. But he didn't really believe in God. He just was like, okay, I'm going to go on the winning side. I want to be with the winning team. So
hmm.
that is the major midrash on this. It's in Bereshit Rabbah. It's also quoted by Rashi. Um, oh, this brought me the wrong place. Um, so this is where we get the midrash. Now, um, right, this is the story that Jessica was referring to earlier. Terach was an idol worshiper. One time he went away. He installed Avram as a salesman. A person came to buy. He said, how old are you? He'd say, 50, 60. He'd say to him, woe to the man who's 60 years old and is bowing to something one day old. He'd be ashamed and leave. Another woman said, I want to give them flour. He took a club, shattered all the idols but the big one, and put the club in the biggest one, right? So he shatters the idols. And he tells his dad, oh, they got in a fight and killed each other. Terach said, what are you talking about? And then he said, don't you hear what is going on? Terach hands him over to Nimrod. So Nimrod says to Avram, okay, let's worship the fire. Avram says, well, I'll do water instead. It extinguishes fire. And Nimrod says, okay, let's bow to water. He says, oh, let's do the clouds. He goes round and round and round. And finally, Nimrod throws him there. Haran was conflicted. He said, okay, if Avram's victorious, I'll say I'm with this guy. If Nimrod's victorious, I'm with this guy. And when Avram descended, they asked him, who are with you? I'm with Abraham. They took him, threw him in the fire. That's what's written. Haran died in the presence of Terach. So this is Midrash. This is where Midrash comes in. There's multiple Midrashim. I think Jessica, you said another one, which is, oh, he looked around and he said, who could have made all this? So that's another Midrash, right? Which, by the way, that's kind of like the clockmaker argument, right? That's kind of a medieval philosophical argument. So guess when that Midrash was written? It was written in the medieval time, right? So, kind of, um, yeah. So it invites you to think, like, how would he have come to this? Another one that I really like personally is it's the burning tower metaphor. So this is like they say it's like there was a burning tower, and someone comes and sees a tower on fire, and he says, isn't there an owner? Where's the owner? This thing's on fire. And at that point, the owner peeks his head out of the castle, out of the tower, and says, I am here. I'm the owner of this castle. So I think that's a very interesting, profound one. Because what's that one saying? What's the implication? How does God realize that there's a God? How does Abraham realize that God exists? Or why does God appear? What precipitates it?
Arian's question of religion of his own world.
He's questioning the world. Yeah. He's like, where's God? Like, this place is awful. Like, is there really no God here? Like, what's going on? So it's not noticing this amazing presence of God. It's noticing the absence of God. Um, by the way, um, when the Jews end up in Egypt, this is last week's parsha. The Jews are, last week's parsha. The Jews are in Egypt. They become slaves, and then what happens? The one verse before God decides He's going to redeem them, and we know how that comes about. What happens? God hears their groans, right? They groaned, and God heard their groan. So there's this idea that it's in the yearning, it's in noticing God's absence that we actually open ourselves up to God's revelation, to miracles. Rabbi Nachman talks about this aspect of God that's hidden in God's absence. That just noticing God's absence, he calls it this hiddenness within hiddenness. That inside that absence, God is actually hiding. So that's the midrash I wanted to share with you. So then God says to Abraham, "Go from your native land, from your father's house to the house I will show you." Let me show you what's translation. Oh, it went back down there. Shoot. Change my place. Okay, translation. So I want to show. So let's look at if you look at the Fox translation, God says to Abraham, "Go you forth from your land, from your kindred, from your father's house." Literally, it says, "Go to yourself." So in other words, what Rashi says is, "Go for your own benefit. It's for you." The Slonimer Rebbe has a beautiful thing on this. Why did it say from your land, from your kindred, from your father's house? Why does it have to say all three? Like if he's going to a land, he can just say, go from your native land to land I'll show you. Or just
to
go to the
leave
land.
behind everything that he knows from his father's house as well. He has to become something else.
Exactly. So right, option A, he has to leave that all behind, right? He has to leave the habits he got from his father's house. He has to leave the habits he got from his society. And maybe even your land, the Slonimer Rebbe says these are your natural your natural dispositions. So God calls all of us to leave our natural dispositions, but actually the Slonimer Rebbe, he says it a little differently. He says that we find our spiritual mission by looking at our spiritual disposition, by looking at our parents and what we were raised with, by looking at our society. It's not that we abandon all those, it's that we find our mission in life by looking at those, right? All of us are put into a certain situation and given a mission based exactly on that situation. We all have a unique mission in life to sanctify that situation we find ourselves in.
I like
Anything
the
else?
footnote there on that where he kept him in suspense. In other words, he basically kept him blind, and the reason he kept him blind is so he would appreciate it when he saw it.
Okay, beautiful. One other thing from this parsha, kind of big mitzvah that nowadays in some circles people question a lot. In 17, 15, 17, 17. Okay, so God says to Abraham, "As for you, you and your offspring to come throughout the ages shall keep my covenant." Um, and the word for covenant is brit. Such shall be the brit, the covenant between me and your offspring. Every male shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. That shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. Throughout the generations, every male among you shall be circumcised at 8 days. Why do you think God wants Abraham to be circumcised? And not just Abraham, right? Every Jew, right? So every male among you that follows you.
Isn't it seen kind of like an offering, like in a way to God to show, your dedication to him?
So
A
you're
painful
almost
offering.
symbolically offering your child to God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as an adult with him, I don't know if it was, because it was, very painful and personal.
Sure it was. Now now when they do circumcision on adults, it's in a hospital with anesthesia. Okay. Uh, any other thoughts?
Well, it's not enough just to think it and believe it. We want you to have something to remember your obligation.
Okay. So like a sign, right? So what I like about what you just said, Ben, is now you're looking at the language here, right? It says a sign, right? A sign of the covenant. right?
Right.
So the actual covenant is the Torah or this relationship between us and God. And this is a sign of that relationship. Um, right? So a sign reminds us. A sign is, right? Also, I'm thinking like people who tattoo themselves with the name of their children. Like I met my daughter um, has a classmate. Get you in a minute, Mina. So my daughter's a classmate who her dad has tattooed her name and the name of her sister on his arm. So why do you think he tattooed her name on his arm? I mean, I don't think he's going to forget her.
Show the world that he loves her, like outwardly.
Show the world, and right, and sometimes we want to just express things, right? Like sometimes we just want to express things. Amelia, what were you going to say? What was saying?
Oh, law. I was going to largely say the same thing. It's not just a sign to yourself, but it is a sign to the world as well. It's like you're marking yourself physically as a Jew.
Yeah. And what they say is that, and I don't want to be too gross here. Remember I said that Avram will become Abraham, he gets the hay, and Sarai will become Sarah, she gets the hay. So the mystics say that the Brit is also the letter hay, right? The letter hay kind of surrounds. And if you look at it in script, the letter hay is like two quarter circles. So the mystics actually see it as writing the name of God into your flesh.
Yeah, I was just taught, doesn't Hay represent the word God in Hebrew? The
I mean,
letter, and yeah.
in this case, yeah, in this case. Um, yeah. And the other thing is that like I think there's a sense here that the mitzvot require a physical act, right? That Paul came along later and wanted to replace kind of wants to replace physical mitzvot with what he calls faith. And there's this notion here that I think, in general, Judaism is an embodied spiritual practice that we always want to physically embody the things we believe in. Okay. Um, Kashrut. So I apologize. I didn't realize we really finished with Shabbat, and so we're up to the Kashrut section. So it's okay. We can still talk about it, and then for next week, please read chapter 2. Um, share. Okay. Um, gosh, I'm sorry. I have a hard time with this new whiteboard function. Um, so Shabbat, we talked about the different denominational approaches to Shabbat. What's going on here? Are you guys seeing a whiteboard or not? I'm not. Shoot, I'm not seeing a whiteboard. Share.
Nope.
No. Those tools. Did they destroy the whiteboard function? Whiteboard. All right. Okay. Well, whiteboard doesn't seem to be working right now. Okay. Apologies for that. So, what's the Reformed Jewish approach to kashrut? So we're gonna talk about a kind of maximalist approach in a minute, right? We'll do a full on traditional what is kashrut in Orthodoxy and why. But before we do that, I kind of want to lay the land in terms of different denominational approaches. So what's the Reform approach? Does anybody know?
You don't have to keep it at all.
Yeah, you don't have to keep kosher because we don't find it meaningful. So in 1883, there was a famous banquet at the Reform Rabbinical School in Cincinnati, and they served shrimp. Um, I have I have heard from some sources the claim that it was by accident, the caterers didn't know. I've heard from others the claim that actually it was their way of pushing out of the reform movement anybody who was holding on to those ancient folkways. But basically, there's this idea that if it's not meaningful, you don't need to do it. So Reform Judaism has this idea that of kind of informed choice. You should try it, see if it's meaningful for you. Does it work for you? And if not, you don't do it. Um, renewal. So I mentioned earlier, right, with Shabbat, I talked about renewal as being more spiritually focused. So does anybody know? Probably not. Has anybody heard of eco-kashrut? Yes, Amelia.
It's basically eating low on the food chain, largely vegetarianism, just lowering your carbon footprint with your diet, but also eating kosher at the same time. Oh,
Right.
sorry about my cat.
So and I'm going to take it a step further and say, instead of saying also keeping kosher, a real strong statement would be to say,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, it is kashrut first
yes,
and foremost.
yes, it is
I didn't,
kashrut
yeah.
because kashrut is about sanctifying our eating. And in this day and age, the way I need to sanctify my eating is by being aware of the environmental impact, the social impact. Right, there's lots of issues around food production, both in terms of how animals are treated, how workers are treated, the impact on the land, all of those things. So Reb Zalman, the founder of the renewal movement, he asked this halachic question. Let's say I'm serving kiddush, I'm serving a fleishy kiddush, and um, I can make this easier or harder, but I'm serving a fleishy kiddush, and I can use coffee mugs, which have previously been used for coffee with milk, or I can use plastic cups. What's more kosher, right? So traditionally, what's the traditional answer?
Plastic cup.
Plastic
Use the
cups.
plastic cups, right? But if I look at the environmental issues, then I say, well, wait a second, like the it's terrible for the environment. And then if I really take a halakhic approach and I try to merge the two, then I ask, okay, number one, how unkosher are those cups, right? Are there other ways I can do this? Maybe as a synagogue, we just need to get two sets of cups. I don't know, but like um, sometimes it comes out as one over the other. So I have a friend, although ironically now she's joining the Reform Rabbinical Association, so maybe it's a bad example. But right, she would eat organic, not kosher chicken rather than kosher. But ideally, you would eat organic and kosher. That would be the ideal. So that's what eco-kashrut is. Um, Anybody know the conservative Jewish approach? And we'll go into more detail on the conservative Jewish because it's a bit more nuanced.
I think the
Kind of
conservative
assume they keep
approach,
kosher.
sorry,
Oh no, sorry.
you can go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I assume they keep kosher.
So okay, good. So good start, right? The starting point, they keep kosher. Yes. Then okay, Jessica.
I believe they're a little more strict with the cuts of meat they eat, I believe. Like for example, they can't have like filet mignon because of something about the cut, like the artery of the leg of the
Right.
cow. They separate any type of dairy 6 hours in between, 6 or 8 hours in between dairy and meat consumption.
Right. So we'll get into the specific basic prohibitions. We'll get into all of them. But compared to Orthodoxy, the conservative movement has some leniencies. Um, a couple of the ones, and we'll discuss them next week, they allow for wine without a hechsher, domestic wine. They allow for domestic cheese. They allow for marshmallows. And informally, they allow for eating vegetarian, or definitely vegetarian restaurants. Um, and some of them informally will say there are ways to eat vegetarian at non-kosher restaurants. But yeah, so that's the conservative movement. So but all of those have like long papers detailing why they made the leniency. So, reform will just say, well, who's you're really going to try never eat out. You live in Huntsville, Alabama, you're really never going to eat out. That's what reform would say. And conservative would say, well, let's look at the prohibitions and find a way to observe the prohibitions. You know, you can still find a way to observe the prohibitions. Um, okay, so the purpose of keeping kosher. What do you see as the purpose of keeping kosher? Any ideas?
I believe it's because, it's what God originally asked of us. And a lot of it, I think, could have to do with health benefits to prevent. Oh,
I got it. Wow, amazing.
oh, Prevent, maybe prevent gluttony.
Slow
That's just,
down, slow down, slow down. One idea at a time. So idea. Okay.
God told
Hold on.
us to.
Wait. You're doing three ideas, Jessica. So you said three. You actually said three ideas. Okay. So let's go backwards in time. So God told us to prevent gluttony. What was the first thing you said?
Health reasons.
Okay. Let's keep brainstorming. Anybody else? Any other possible reasons to throw out there?
Can I say, I'm so sick, by the way, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear that you're sick. Yeah.
It says that, well, everything that we eat affects our soul directly. So, as a Jew, we shall keep attention to what we eat. That's the reason that we shall keep it kosher.
Good. Good. So I wrote affects us spiritually, right? Spiritual purity. Um, any other thoughts?
To make our interactions with the world, eating, how we live our life meaningful. Keep
What was
God
that?
in mind while we do it.
Did you say peaceful? Was that the last word you said?
Oh, sorry, meaningful.
What do you mean by meaningful?
To think about what we're doing while we're doing it instead of just going through the actions.
Good. So like, how can I say mindfulness during consumption?
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Other thoughts?
I'd just like to say that these are mitzvah laid down in the Torah, so God has told us to do this.
Right. So that was right. That was the first one. God told us to, because I said so. Not me personally, but
I mean, they're
so.
not really explained in
Right. So in general, mitzvot are not explained. There's this idea of a chok, which is a law with no explanation, and a mishpat, a law that we understand. There's rational and irrational. One approach to Judaism is to say it's not particularly rational. God just wants us to do it. Now, this is very much a minority view. I'm trying to even think who takes this approach. Like if you look at the history of Jewish thought, what they basically say is, look, when a doctor prescribes medicine, you don't necessarily understand the way that medicine works. You can ask, maybe you'll understand. With Torah, it's like medicine. Now, I don't know the way it works, but I have faith that it works. But that doesn't mean that it's irrational. It doesn't mean God doesn't particularly have a reason, right? It's not like God's not being arbitrary. There's a good reason. I just don't happen to know it. So what they say, what Rambam in this line of argument say is a chok, a apparently irrational law, is something we just don't understand the reason of yet. And the classic example of that is shatnez, which is clothing made of a mixture of wool and linen. And Maimonides, when he talks about it, he talks about shatnez as being like, we will never know the reason for shatnez. It's a chok, but God is not irrational. God is good. God is rational. Therefore, God gives us a law that rule is good and rational and good for us. So so kind of I'm personally hesitant on the God told us to, because yeah, we observe it on one level because God told us to, but I think we also, I mean, I don't think most of us would want to think of Judaism as, okay, there's this bunch of rules that aren't particularly rational, but there's this, for some reason I follow them because God created me, so it's just the right thing to do. Right? I don't relate to that. Right? I relate much more to this idea, like God is benevolent and gives us this guide to life. Um, Preventing gluttony is a classic explanation, by the way. Um, Nachmanides uses this as his definition of holiness. That holiness is self-restraint, right? So according to Nachmanides, holiness. Okay. Health is an interesting one. So the problem with health as an argument is that um, number one, if there are things that used to be unhealthy that now aren't, then it could change. Um, I don't know. It's interesting because there's an interesting question as whether unhealthy food is not kosher inherently. Um, and I think Maimonides would say it's not, right? Maimonides would say a candy bar is not kosher, but I don't think most people want to go down that road. So it's kind of an interesting argument, right? It's probably true, but no one wants to go there. You know, um, I, I, I I'm also hesitant about health because I think Torah is more than just kind of physical health. Like there's the spiritual health, which is kind of powerful. Um, so the conscious of mindful drink consumption, Nick, that you brought in, right? Consumption is always destructive, right? When I consume, I kill an animal, I pluck a plant, I'm always destroying something. So can I be mindful even at that moment of destructiveness? One other
Yes,
thing
I'm
people,
being willing, thankful.
well, and by trying not to be overly destructive, right? And or like the Native Americans when they kill a deer, there's certain Native American tribes when they kill the deer, they thank it. They thank its spirit, they acknowledge it, right? They don't give in to the kind of you could give into this like hungry man, right? There's the brand of food, hungry man, right? This is Asav who's like, I'm so hungry, I'm just gonna go out and hunt and kill, and right, we don't give into that, right? There's a kind of animalism inherent in consumption, but we want to be spiritual beings even when we're consuming. The other thing I would have added personally is I think there's a little bit like mezuzot, where it reminds us of Torah. It reminds us of living as holy beings. Um, okay, basic prohibitions, and this is what I forget who gave these. So everybody gets to do one. What are the basic prohibitions from the Torah that Kashrut kind of encapsulates? Anybody want to throw out one?
Uh, don't put meat in milk. Don't put
Good.
a lamb in the milk of its mother.
Don't cook meat and milk. Yep. It's literally, it says don't cook a calf in its mother's milk, but I'm going to turn it, don't cook meat and milk. It's mentioned 3 times. So it's like there's interpretations of that, which is don't eat it, don't cook it, don't even sell it. Okay. Meat and milk. Other prohibitions in the Torah.
Purge the
No,
blood.
What's that, Ben?
Purge the blood.
No blood. By the way, it only applies to animals. Not doesn't apply to fish. Anybody else?
You're not supposed to eat like birds of prey.
Good. So forbidden species. So we have birds of prey. What are the signs of a kosher fish?
have scales.
Yep. Fish need fins and scales. And what are the signs of a kosher animal?
No cloven feet.
Oops.
They have to have cloven feet and they chew their cud. Chew cud. Okay. Other prohibitions from the Torah.
Well, isn't there a prohibition on like wild animals? Animals that are, I mean, I'm not quite sure. Is that
Well, if there's a wild animal that chews its cud and has cloven feet, like a goat, I mean,
right?
there's no prohibit. I mean, I'm not sure what you're thinking.
Okay, I'm not sure where I thought there was something about that. So
So,
I don't know.
so for instance, giraffes theoretically are kosher. No one's
Oh,
going to go out. No one's going to go out and eat one, but theoretically, giraffes are
right,
kosher.
right, gotcha.
Yeah. Yes, Amelia. Another one.
Could you eat a giraffe if it was like ritually sacrificed as opposed to hunted? Because I know there's a prohibition on hunted animals.
Good. That's the next prohibition. So it
That
has
might have
to
been
be.
what I was getting at. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. That
That's
might have been
okay.
what I was trying to get at was the hunting. I didn't say that right. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Right. So shechted, there's a certain way that it has to be slaughtered. Um, right at this, it's not just this ritual. I mean, there's just a certain technique that has to be used with a knife, and it has to a single stroke of a knife. So it has to be properly shechted. That's the problem. I mean, yeah, it would be really hard to shecht a giraffe.
Yeah.
That's literally treif is something that's been killed by another animal. It gets used for to mean anything non-kosher, but treif really means something is like roach. Okay. Any other prohibitions? Somebody mentioned one earlier. I think who mentioned that the cuts of meat?
I mentioned that it couldn't be anything like, for example, for us in modern day, filet mignon would
Yeah.
not be kosher.
So does anybody know the issue with filet mignon? I'll give you a hint. Filet mignon comes from the rear quarter of the cow.
Something to
Why
do with
would
the
there?
Eh,
right?
What?
sorry.
Something to do with the artery, right?
Not to do with an artery.
The
It's a
superior
nerve.
and
I
or a
think Nick
nerve
was talking.
rather.
Nick, who was talking?
That's
I
what
think there was a few of us.
spine is.
I think everyone was talking.
It's the nerve, isn't it, on the left?
Yes. What's wrong with the nerve?
It goes back,
Who-
I believe, to the Esau and
Yeah.
the birth, the heel,
And
the
Jacob.
struggle with the
Oh,
Jacob.
so close, so close. Jacob and Esau. Yes,
Yeah.
goes to Jacob and Esau. When Jacob spends the night wrestling with the angel like injures him on his leg, on his sciatic nerve. And then it says, and that's why to this day, the Jews don't eat the sciatic nerve, basically. I mean, I know that my quote is off there, but it's the sciatic nerve because of that wrestling scene. So the sciatic nerve. There are some places that will remove the sciatic nerve so that you can eat the rear quarter, but it's much cheaper for kosher slaughterhouses to just send the rear quarter off to sell it as non-kosher meat. But you can find it. It's called some Sephardi remove, and it's called shriveling. It might have that word wrong, but some do remove the nerve, and you can find kosher filet mignon. Although I will say it's not. I don't know. It's not that good. And there's so much hype around it. I don't know. But that's what it takes to have filet mignon. Um, the other one other thing, right? No blood. There's also forbidden fats. Now, these are not fats that you would normally eat. These are but they were things that were offered on the altar in the temple. I think that's for all the basic prohibitions. What about wine?
It should be Jewish wine. I believe.
So the Jewish wine thing is there's on top of this there's going to be rabbinic stuff. What could make a wine prohibited by the Torah? What would give it like a Torah level prohibition? Melina, you have a thought?
Actually, I don't know if I get your question correctly, but I wanted to say that a wine should be made by a Jew.
Yeah, so I'm going to add
No?
rabbinic prohibitions. Yeah, I'm going to add rabbinic prohibitions in a minute. But what is there in the Torah that would be an issue ever with non-Jewish wine?
Well, you have to look for a specific kind of wine if it's Passover.
No, you're already giving me what happens today. I'm asking what are the issues at the root of it,
Oh,
right? So now we do have but that's a good point, right? Passover has extra rules, right? And so there are extra hechshers that are Hasidic hechshers. So you can get Hasidic wine. I don't really understand why a wine would ever not be Hasidic. Like I don't know that there's ever anything in a wine that would not be Hasidic because it's made of grapes. But there is a hechsher, right? The OU with a P at the bottom means for Passover. Um, so with wine, what could someone do with wine that would then render that wine inappropriate for a Jew to use?
Idol worship. Use it
Yes, thank you,
for
Nick. Use it for a libation, right? A libation. Um, I have to say, when I was young and I didn't know about really these rules, uh, you know, I hung out with a seminarian friend of mine, and we were hanging out at the rectory, and he broke out the altar wine. I didn't know. Um, so yes, wine of libation. Okay, rabbinic prohibitions. Um, somebody mentioned wine of nine. of non-Jews. So wine touched by non-Jews, even touched by non-Jews. Anybody know the reason for this prohibition? It's to avoid intermarriage, traditionally. Or I will say intermingling and intermarriage. It was just intermingling, to avoid social intermingling. So it originally was to avoid socializing. So guess why the conservative movement does not require a wine to have hechsher? Alina?
I I have a question. I've heard that we are not allowed to drink wine with a non-Jew. Is it related to what you're saying?
To drink wine with um
Not to
I've never
drink
that
wine
it
with non-Jew, or
no, I've
not
never.
even non-Jew in general. We are not allowed to drink wine with someone that we really don't want to get close to them.
I mean, I'd agree with you. Like, you shouldn't go out drinking with someone you don't want to get close to. I think I'd agree with that. I don't know that I could say I've never seen that as a halakhic statement. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's a generally, I could see someone saying, you should really watch who your friends are. Don't get close with people you don't want to, you're going to absorb values and ideas from people you hang out with, and you should hang out with people with values and ideas that you want to absorb. And I could very well imagine someone saying you shouldn't go out drinking with like I can see someone Orthodox saying, don't go out drinking with non-Jews. You don't want to absorb that non-Jewish energy. Could see it. I've never heard of it as a halachic statement, honestly. But I mean, somebody could say it, sure. Um, so the conservative movement, though, says, right, we do want to mingle. Wait, we want to live in America. We want to socialize with non-Jews. We don't want to marry them, but we want to hang out with them and be friendly with them. So that's why the conservative movement says you can have wine does not need extra. That's why. What other things are prohibited that we haven't touched on?
I have a question. Maybe this might be better for next week, but
Okay.
could we talk about eggs at some point?
Okay. What about eggs?
I'm so Blue Greenberg mentions in the chapter that one of the things about being kosher is that you crack the egg in the glass, but she didn't specify why. And I learned later it was because there might be blood in the egg if the chicken had a rooster
Yeah.
involved in its life.
Mhm.
And I didn't know this. And I'm a farmer, so it was
Yeah.
something that I had to be
Yeah.
taught
So
because
this goes back to that no blood, right? That goes back to the no blood rule.
yeah,
What happens nowadays, though, is that from what I've heard and researched, um, we don't have roosters hanging out in the chicken coop. So it's
right.
not really an issue. If you get organic eggs, there are certain organic eggs that always have a certain red spot, but it turns out that red spot is not blood, it's pigmentation. Um, and so for me, this becomes an issue because if you go back to eco kashrut, if you research how chickens are treated, then chickens that are not like pasture raised are kept in very inhumane conditions. So then the question for me becomes like, is it really kosher to eat an egg of a chicken that's been tortured all its life? And personally, like I would say, if you ask the question that way, it's like, how can you like if kashrut is about being humane, being mindful, being holy, how can I like torture? How can I endorse torturing a chicken? So I got to eat the brown eggs, and those always have those spots. But if you
Yeah,
research it,
I eat the eggs with the spots too, and
yeah, they're
I
just spots.
worry that they might not be kosher.
No, they're just
Um,
spots. They're just
so
spots.
yeah, I tried to give some of my farm eggs to somebody at the local synagogue, and they didn't want them because they might have spots because of the rooster situation. And I was like,
Do you have roosters? Do you have roosters on your farm, Amelia?
yeah, we have two roosters on our farm, but we have a lot of chickens. I don't think they get everywhere, but
But are the roosters like in this? Do they have access to the chickens?
they do have access to the chickens. The concept of having a rooster with your chickens is the rooster kind of protects the chickens from predators that come around. Um, and they do provide a function. on the farm. So we do have them. So, I mean, we could have chickens without roosters, but they would be more exposed and
Right. Right. Yeah. So with the white eggs, those don't have the pigment spots, and so you can check for blood spots. Um, it's more of an issue with the brown eggs, which have the pigment spots.
Yeah, I have eggs in like 4 different colors. I have green eggs, I have blue eggs, I have white eggs, and I have brown eggs.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love those. Okay. Cheese. What would be the issue with cheese? Anybody know?
The
Rennet.
way it's made. Oh, yep.
Yes. It's made with rennet. What's rennet from?
Dairy
From a
enzymes.
cow's body.
So
No,
traditionally,
cat's stomach, excuse me.
yes,
Cow's stomach.
traditionally rennet comes from like a little calf's stomach. And so it's not meat and milk though, because um, the Talmud already allowed you to have cheese. So you're allowed to have cheese. It's that the rennet could be not kosher. That's the question. So rennet from a non-kosher animal. And then the debate is, is the rennet really a food? Is it what? But that's what it is. And then cooked food, meaning um, a kosher restaurant is always going to have a Jew cooking the food. Um, so really, really traditional people are going to say like it should be cooked by a Jew. And some people also follow Chalav Yisrael, which means milk made by a Jew. Okay. Does anybody know what this term means? Fleshig or Bisari? Does anybody know what that means? Okay, so that means meat, right? So it can food or plates or whatever can be fleshig. That means they've been used for cooking meat, or in Hebrew, basari. If it's dairy, anybody know the term for dairy? Milchig or halab. Dairy. And if it's neither, do you know what it's called?
Are
Yes. Harv equals neither. So some people will have two sets or more of pots and pans and dishes. We'll talk later, definitely when we come up to Passover, about how we kosher those things, how we make them kosher again. And then, of course, there's textures on food. Everyone knows what these textures are. What they look like. These are symbols saying that it's been inspected by a rabbi to make sure it's kosher. We'll talk more next week about some of the more other details of kashrut, but any questions from what we covered today? Okay. Okay, Telushkin chapter 3. How do I stop this? How do I share? There we go. Continue. Okay, so in Telushkin chapter 3, he talks about good habits. And I don't think we didn't talk about this last week, right? So good habits in Hebrew, midot, values. So we want to ingrain good habits. And he talks about different ways of doing this. One is this idea that even if we don't have it ingrained and we don't feel it, we still do it. We practice doing good. There's a phrase in the Talmud that says, "Mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma." Even if you're out of doing something for the wrong reason, you come to doing it for the right reason. So even if you don't feel charitable and you don't feel generous, you should still give charity, right? Even if I don't feel the mitzvah, I should still do it. Another thing he says is we're influenced by the people who live around us. So we should try to live in a good neighborhood with good people. I remember when I was I was working at a psychiatric hospital in Camden. There was this person who said, "Oh, he got out and then he went to a bar with these people from Camden, and then they kept going back to the same town and getting into the same bad culture." Right? Melina mentioned this rabbi who said you shouldn't go out drinking with. I think did he say non-Jews, Melina? Is that what he said?
Actually, it's better not to drink with anyone that you don't want to like share
Right.
very same values. But unfortunately, it says especially non-Jews. For example,
Okay.
you can go and drink beer with a non-Jew, but you shall not share your wine with them. And can I ask something about kosher, by the way?
Of course.
I have a friend of mine, as you remember, she was coming here from Israel. And when we wanted to go and eat, so I go eat outside, usually vegetarian place. But she said, oh, she is very orthodox. She said, we shall not go to a restaurant which serves meat because we don't know if the plates that we are eating from could be kosher or not in this case. I wanted to ask about this subject from you.
Yeah. And that's a legitimate approach. So there's a range of approaches.
Everybody accepts that because I really didn't know that, dear Rab David.
Yeah. So an Orthodox person will not eat at a non-kosher restaurant,
I get
right?
you. Okay.
This is one of the reasons why Orthodox people will live, kind of, there's a feeling like they have to live in a Jewish community. And one of the reasons is if you don't live in a Jewish community, you're never going out to eat. Yeah.
Thank you. Totally understand.
Okay. Another thing he says is if someone comes to you, imagine you're the only one who can help. Um, he says we should pray for the community and not just ourselves, right? That there's this idea if you look in the Jewish prayers, I never just pray for myself, right? I say, heal us, give us a good year. There's this idea of correcting bad habits by doing exactly the opposite. So if I'm stingy, I should try to be generous. If I'm critical, I should try to praise people. I need to become aware of my faults. That this battle of improving my midot is a lifetime process. This is perhaps even the reason we were put here on earth is to improve our midot. And we never win it. It's just a process of gradual improvement. And then in chapter 4, actually, check this out. Yes, a great list of 6 terrible traits. So this is page 59 in Teleshkin. Insatiability, always wanting more, spiritually dangerous. Rationalization, using our reason to justify things that are wrong, stops us from becoming better. Having a greater concern with winning an argument than with being right. We're not open to growing. Letting pride or stubbornness stop us from acknowledging mistake. And wasting time. Not one that we often think of, but like there's an idea in Hebrew called bittul Torah, wasting time. I don't want to slam people for watching sports or whatnot, but there's an idea that like if I'm spending hours doing that, I could have been volunteering, I could have been studying Torah, I could have been doing something, something beneficial to myself spiritually or to the world. And then the last thing he mentions as a bad character trait is being indifferent to someone else's suffering. So if you could add a 5-minute activity to fight a bad habit, what would that be? You could add a 5-minute activity to your daily routine to fight a bad habit.
If I can. This may sound dumb, but one of my really bad habits is getting caught up in phone games and just losing track of time. I don't know if this is even fits in here, but just taking a few minutes to go put my phone away so that I don't have to go find it and play, I don't know if that even makes sense, but that would help me be more present.
Sure. Right. Yeah, you might need to lock it up for more than 5 minutes, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Just take 5 minutes to go lock it up, and then
it's 5 minutes to lock it up, and then keep it there for
right for the rest of the day, etc. Yeah, I guess yes, exactly.
Well, I have a suggestion of, if you could do more than 5 minutes work on this, but if you have a temper, taking 5 minutes to, practice mercy, forgiveness, and grace, and meditate on that.
Mm-hmm. I had this was a little silly, but I drove my brother's stuff to New York City, and I had a strap under I strapped the stuff on my roof and then through my windows, and it ruined my seatbelt thing because it didn't it stopped it from coming back and forth. And so from then on, every so often, my car would just beep at me. So I was like, oh wow, this is practice in being non-reactive. You know, not getting upset when my car beeps at me.
I love that, Rev W.
I
And
think I will go outside more and uh, think about things that I like. Make 5 minutes thinking about things that I'm grateful for, because focusing on the negatives in life or something that I think I do too much. So being thankful for the things that I have and taking time away from my day to think on that to make me more grateful for what I have.
it's beautiful. Have you heard of a gratitude inventory, Nick? Like making a list, like an actual list, not just thinking, but actually writing out a list of everything you can think of to be grateful for.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
And then what I've heard is like, okay, you need to do it for 5 minutes, right? The first 10 seconds is easy. The first minute's a little harder. The second minute's like, but like really, really pulling everything. Great. Anybody else?
I think I really agreed with the angry one. Like if, you're someone quick to temper, to take time to meditate on, forgiving them. I forgot who said that. I think it was
Of
Forrest, but
course.
that one resonated with me a lot.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I experience traffic, therefore I become very judgmental when I'm on Interstate 55.
Good. So what could you practice to be non-judgmental in traffic?
Taking my time and having patience to realize that they are the big idiots and I'm a bigger idiot for getting mad at them. How about
Sure.
that?
Sure. Sure. Right. Letting people get in front of you, right? Like, defensive driving, they always like when I was a kid, I didn't understand when I was a teenager, I didn't really understand what they meant by defensive driving. Right. It's like, okay, let them get in front of me. Let lots of people let them all go. Beautiful.
And there's a point when it becomes offensive driving.
There is.
I
There is.
have to get to that exit. So I mean, it's a constant struggle on a daily basis. But
Right.
one thing I get on the interstate when I get on the interstate, there are people who are coming in for a landing at the exit after I'm trying to get onto the interstate. So they're whizzing by me at 80 miles per hour with a different county tag on it. And I'm trying not to lose my mind and
Okay.
call them what I'm
So,
thinking about them.
so if you made an excuse for them, what would be the excuse?
I just did. They're bigger idiots than
No, no,
I
no,
am.
not that they're bigger idiots. Like a more positive excuse.
Oh,
Positive
more
excuse.
positive. Oh, I got to
Yeah,
work on that. I'm
like
sorry,
like
boss.
I'm thinking, whoa, there's another one whose wife is going into labor right now. Whoa, another one
Yeah.
is
Like I said, it's one that I've got to work on. It's
right.
just that's just the way it is. I'll work on it
So,
though, I promise.
so one of the practices that, in terms of, and I think next week is we're reading about judging people, chapter 5, is to always come up with an excuse for people. And to come up, we have this game that Tanya and I play where we try to come up with the most colorful, creative excuse for bad behavior. So that's why I'm suggesting that when they're whizzing by, right, what would be the most colorful, creative, positive excuse? Like, oh, the wife is in the car and she's in labor, right? Like, um, trying to come up with and have fun with it.
Okay, I'll try.
Great. Um, so the last thing I want to do today, we talked last week about the second paragraph of the Shema, which talked about reward and punishment. And I wanted to share a little bit more about um, the classic sources that speak to reward and punishment. Um, so the first thing I wanted to share is from Nachmanides or Ramban. So not to be confused with Maimonides, Rambam with an M on the end. Ramban was the leader of French Jewry in the 14th century. Um, so they wanted to say, and when he says they wanted to say, I think he means the rabbis. There's no gain in the commandment for the Holy One, blessed be He, may He be elevated. Rather, the gain, the benefit is for man himself. We benefit from mitzvot. to prevent him from damage or bad belief or disgusting character trait, or to remember the miracles and wonders of the Creator, may he be blessed, and to know God. Right? So in other words, we don't do mitzvot for a reward, right? I'm not doing them because I'm going to get some reward. I'm doing them for a specific personal benefit, right? It could be prevent me from damage, could be prevent from physical harm, right? Someone mentioned health as possible with Kashrut. What anybody know a mitzvah which very specifically is about preventing damage? What Jessica, do you have a pool?
I wish.
Okay. So I have a pool in Florida, and around my pool, I have to have a fence. Does anybody know the similar legislation in the Torah?
It's about having a fence or a gate around your terrace.
Yep. Yeah, you got to have a fence on your roof. Probably applies to pools as well. Yep. Right. So preventing from physical harm, preventing from bad belief. Right. So what's a mitzvah that prevents us from bad belief?
Not worshiping idols.
Right. So when I daven, that word prevents me from bad belief. Right. When I say Shema Yisrael and I'm only serving God, that prevents me from bad belief. From a disgusting character trait, we talked about keeping kosher and how that keeps us from being animalistic and cruel. To remember the miracles and wonders of the Creator, may he be blessed, that goes to davening, and to know God, right, to connect to God. This is the meaning of to purify them. There's that mitzvot come to purify us, that we become like purified silver. As the action of a smelter is not without a reason, God doesn't give us mitzvot for no reason, right? It's not just we keep Torah because God said so. Rather, to extract the dross from it. Torah is given to purify us. So too are the commandments to extract from our hearts every bad belief and inform us of the truth and always remind us of it. So this is one of my favorite passages in all of Torah study, right? Because he's saying like mitzvot come to purify us. Don't look for an external reward. The reward is that purification process, is how it impacts our life. Any questions or comments on this?
I like it.
Great. I'm gonna go to this one next. The next one, oh shoot. Okay, this is from Pirkei Avot. Do people know what the Mishnah is? I don't know if everybody knows. Anybody not know what the Mishnah is?
Oh, I didn't realize I was muted. But isn't the Mishnah? Oh no, Midrash is what I was thinking of. I don't know.
Okay,
This.
Mishnah is what's called the oral Torah. It was written down in the year 220. It has all the rules. So the Torah says keep Shabbos. The Mishnah says here are the 39 malachot. It has very detailed rules. And each of the books is one area. So there's one book about Shabbat. There's one book about Pesach. There's one volume about damages. But then there's one volume called Pirkei Avot. And these are just the ethical maxims that the rabbis used to say. And it's customary, by the way, to read Pirkei Avot. It's got 6 or 7 chapters, and you read one chapter each week between Passover and Shavuot. So Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, Mishnah 3. Antignos of Socho received the oral tradition from Shimon the Righteous. He used to say, do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a word, but be like servants who serve the master without the expectation of receiving a word, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. So what do you think? It's kind of weird because like in the Shema, we say we're getting a reward. And here he says we should not be like servants who are expecting to get a reward. Any thoughts? What does it mean to be like servants who serve without receiving a reward? Or I should say, what's the opposite? What is it to be like servants who serve with the expectation of receiving a reward? What's that?
Is greedy.
Okay, Amelia,
I would like to see it in place they don't like service.
what's that?
They don't like being in service to their master. like they're unhappy with their situation.
I guess what I'm asking is, what would be an example in contemporary life of serving with the expectation of receiving a reward? What would that look like as an example?
Employer, employee.
Well,
Cap-
okay, employer, employee. What would that look like in religion?
If you were giving to charity and you expected like a plaque or something for
I expect,
everyone to clap
right?
for you.
Or
Yeah.
maybe I expect God to reward me financially, right? I am like, this the what these churches that talk about like becoming
the
rich and
prosperity gospel.
what's that, Amelia?
The
What's it called?
prosperity gospel.
Right,
The
prosperity
prosperity
gospel.
gospel. Yeah, they're
Right.
thieves.
This is anti-prosperity gospel. This is like, do not serve God because you think that that's the way to get rich. It's not about getting rich.
One of the things I see is I kind of see when people have expectations of reward, it makes the action a transactional thing. They're not doing the action because the action is the right thing to do. They're doing the action specifically because they want something, not because of the intrinsic value of the action. That's how I interpret that.
Right. Are there still people around who serve God because they think it'll get them to heaven?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
good grief.
Right?
You did not
That's
ask that.
what's that, Ben?
In this political climate, you asked that question? Really? Oh my gosh. Tune in to Benny Hill.
I wasn't trying to bring up politics. I'm not sure what the connection is with politics, and I'm kind of scared. I kind of don't want to know.
I know.
I grew up in a very strict fundamentalist environment, and it was very much you have to do all of these things or you are going to be thrown in a pit of fire and punished. So everything was done with this intention of receiving this reward or avoiding punishment. So it just, that's what I grew up with.
So the Zohar, the 13th century mystical work, has an interesting take on that, right? Where it says, okay, it says here, let the fear of heaven be upon you. If I'm worried that if I sin, I'm going to be thrown into the fiery pit of hell, what specifically am I afraid of?
Hell.
I'm afraid of hell. So am I worshiping God or am I worshiping hell? So, right. So the Zohar actually implies that if your fear is, oh, I'm afraid of being punished, you're actually like satanic. Like, that's what it implies, right? That fear, real fear is not, I'm afraid God is going to punish me. It's awe. It's something else, right? It's awe, it's respect, it's reverence. It's like, wow, there's this amazing spiritual reality that I'm trying to live up to. That's what it means by fear. Okay. And then another one in Pirkei Avot, different chapter 4:2. Ben Azai says, be quick to perform a minor commandment as the case of a major one. No one, by the way, ever defines what's minor, what's major. And run away from sin. One commandment leads to another, and one sin leads to another. The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. The reward for a sin is a sin. Right? So what does that mean? The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah? It actually literally, the schar mitzvah mitzvah. The reward of the mitzvah is a mitzvah. Right? So what's he saying about the reward?
The reward is the thing in itself.
So maybe it's a thing in itself, right? Or maybe it's the next mitzvah, right? That the result of doing a mitzvah is I'm walking this pathway, and I'm going to find more mitzvot to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's not God giving me a prize. It's that there's kind of spiritual consequences that happen when I embark on living a life of mitzvah.
If you do it in small steps, you'll lead to a larger step.
Yes. Now here's an interesting take on this one. The rabbis of the Talmud said the reward, and this is a Hasidic rabbi, Menachem Nachman of Chernobyl, Hasidic. The rabbis of the Talmud said the reward for mitzvah is a mitzvah. God gave us commandments so we might cleave to God. So the Hasidim were very into spirituality. They were Orthodox, they were halachic, but very much focused on spirituality. Thus, the reward for mitzvah is a mitzvah. That means mitzvah means joining together. By means of a mitzvah, one cleaves to God, and there's no greater reward than that. Right? So the reward of the mitzvah is that mitzvah connects us to God. And with that, I'm going to go to the last one, which in some ways is the the slightly hardest source from, is in the Talmud, it says, man's reward is not in this world, meaning it's in Olam Haba, the world to come. So there is an idea of Olam Haba, the world to come, that is this state of being close to God after we die. Often when the Talmud describes this state, it depicts it as a yeshiva. We sit there, we study, God's in the front, Moshe's in the first row. Depending on how good you've been, you get a front row seat or a back row seat. So let's see what he says. Fundamentally flawed, the physical fleeting world lacks the currency to adequately reward the righteous. Such a person's reward is reserved for the world to come. How pathetically inadequate any reward in this world is explained by Rabbi Dessler. All the happiness and pleasure of a lifetime, coupled with the joy of every person in every city and country you've ever lived, if you could concentrate them in one moment, it couldn't provide reward even for the smallest mitzvah, compared to the delight man will experience connected with God in the world to come. The resulting state of devekut is brought out by a lifetime of mitzvah performance. So in other words, that little devekut means literally, it's like glue, it's cleaving, being close to God. That closeness to God brings our soul closer to God. And what he's saying is, heaven is that my soul has gotten close to God. And once I no longer am limited by the physical world, my soul has this complete blissful closeness to God. The greatest reward imaginable, that is a spiritual eternal one, will be fully felt in the world to come. The spiritual world to come is determined by whatever we make of ourselves and our achievements in the physical world. What a Jew does here comes to define his reward there. Obviously, it's imperative that we chase after mitzvah opportunities to develop our closeness with God. That relationship is the ultimate and eternal reward. So that's what I want to share about this idea of the reward for mitzvah. I hope you guys have been practicing the Shema, those 2 paragraphs. We're going to do the 3rd paragraph when we meet again in 3 weeks. And also we'll go a little farther in Torah, and Philippians chapter 5 and Greenberg chapter 2. So any other closing comments or questions before we leave?
So do we meet in 2 weeks?
I think so. Let me just double check my calendar. Yes, we meet in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the rhythm of the class is sort of 3 on, 1 off, but there's some flexibility depending on my schedule. So we're off next week. We meet in 2 weeks.
All
Okay.
right. February the
Have a,
5th.
what's that?
February 5th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did want
Stay
to share
warm.
one thing that was kind of interesting with my little group that we met Thursday night, and we were looking at the different occurrences of prayer uh, in the Torah, and we distinguished between these 6 different words used for prayer in different places against blessing. The root of blessing means to bend a knee, to be on a knee. And so that is why we bend at certain points in the service, because that's a substitute for actually getting on our knee. And so it was kind of an interesting discussion, but yeah.
Right. And the knee is something that can lower us to the ground, right? And so
Right.
if you think about a metaphor of God, when God blesses us, God lowers this divine energy towards us to draw divine energy into the world.
Right. As a matter of fact, that's the essence. I found that I read a long time ago. That was the essence of the tree of life that's used in the Kabbalah. Is that's not how we ascend; it's how he descends to earth.
Right. Well, both movements happen, right? Mount
Right.
Sinai, we walk towards the mountain, and God's glory descends onto the mountain. So both movements happen. Um, Berech, also a brecha, is a spring. So this blessing is also the flow of this divine energy that's called Shefa.
Ooh.
By the way, a rabbi I'm very close to wrote a book on this. Her name is Marcia Prager. Her book is called The Path of Blessing.
Okay.
And she talks about the blessing as the berech, the need, the brecha, the spring, all of that.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. See you guys. Bye.